And then Sean, if you're ready, you can start recording to your computer.
Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of our Farm to ECE Garden Chats. We're so glad to have you all here. My name is Laura Thompson, and I am the Director of Strategic Alliances at Big Green. We are really happy to be hosting these Garden Chat series, and today we have our guest, Patty Rhodes from CSU Extension Master Gardeners. Thank you so much, Patty, for joining us today.
Thank you.
She is going to be answering all the questions we have about summer gardening in Colorado and sharing tips and tricks with us, particularly around pest management and having healthy, productive gardens throughout the summer. So thank you to Patty. So I want to start off with a little video to share with you all. We should be well into growing within the grow bags that you started planting with us in week 1 of these garden chats. And so I want to present a little video about how to harvest your greens, your lettuce that you planted. And this is a great resource for us to utilize in lettuce harvesting. So I'm going to share that with you now. And this is a good friend of ours, Farmer Tim, who will talk about harvesting baby lettuce.
You guys today about how to harvest your lettuce. Right here in this garden, we have planted 4 rows of baby lettuce, and we're going to harvest today for a salad. So let's come in and take a look at what we have going on here. You can see we got some really amazing growth in a couple of these rows, but a couple were pretty spotty. So we came through and actually reseeded 10 or 12 days ago, and we're hoping that this lettuce is going to come through and fill in the entire garden space. Baby lettuce, when you plant directly from seed, is a cut and grow again green. So as we get our harvest off of this lettuce right here, we're going to show you how to do that without damaging the plant too much, and it's going to grow back, and we can harvest again in a couple weeks. So let's take a look. What you want to do is make sure that your harvest, when you harvest, these leaves are about 4 to 6 inches tall. That's ideal. That's your best harvest. And taking a ruler out here, we can see that. I've also brought out a couple other things. This is my harvest basket where I'm going to be harvesting into, and then some clean sanitized scissors to get the job done. So right here, working in this row that looks really great, what we're going to do is try to harvest about 1 inch from the surface of the soil. This allows us not to damage the plant too much, but also to get a good harvest of these leaves. Also to note, if you are approaching your salad day, your harvest day, and you need to get as much salad out of here as possible, you can also harvest these smaller leaves to get as much out of your garden as possible. Let's take a look here. I'm going to gather all these leaves together in my hand as much as possible, lift them up, and just come through with my scissors again and cut. Drop these in my basket here. But let's take a look again at what I've cut here. If you want to zoom in on this, we can see that the stems are remaining. The lettuce is going to continue to grow again from this spot, producing more healthy leaves for you, delicious leaves. And so that's how you harvest, with the intention of growing again. And now we're going to just take this lettuce inside, rinse it off in a salad spinner, and you're good to go. Thanks.
Great.
Right. If you're thinking about buying solar panels, don't. The U.S. government will literally buy them for you if you take.
Does not want to stop for me. All right. Oh, YouTube. Great. Well, that was a great introduction to harvesting lettuce from Farmer Tim. And now I would love to turn it over to our guest, Patty, who is going to present on helpful tips for best results in the garden at home. Take it away, Patty.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this all week. The most important thing that I'm going to say, and the best takeaway that you should remember about this presentation is that healthy plants are going to be better able to handle stressors like insects and diseases. You've already got your first crop going, and that's fine. But if you have had any kinds of things going on with them that you've noticed, what I'm talking about today will also apply to succession planting. So when your lettuce is done, and if you're, for example, if you're sowing a second or third crop like carrots or more greens, this will apply to that as well. You really want to remember that when you're putting these plants in, that you need to allow good air circulation between the plants. Again, whether it's your first crop or second or third. And another big thing that's very important here is to irrigate properly. You want to keep the water in the soil and not on your plants. The reason for that is that plants can absorb some water through their leaves, but the bulk of the water uptake that your plants are going to need to grow healthy and produce is on the roots or via the roots. So you want to, whatever type of watering system that you're using, whether that's a handheld hose, a watering can, or if you're going to get really fancy and use soaker hoses, that type of thing to get directly to the roots, don't take your watering can and hold it over the plants. Push the plant a little bit out of the way if you have to, and water directly at the base of the plant. That's going to be the most effective way. Overhead sprinklers, oftentimes there's evaporation before much of the water even hits the leaves. So think about having it down by the roots. And the next thing that you want to do and keep an eye on is to control harmful insects. That means that you're going to be able, you should check the leaves to see if there are eggs or there are adults feeding on any of your plants. So what I'll talk about next is how to control those. When you're looking at insects, you find eggs, for example, you can just, the next slide. The best thing to do is to start with the lightest footprint. What that means is don't go for the, the big insect control, that type of thing. Use your hands. Brush them off into soapy water, squish the eggs, and just look at it that way. When you go through, we check in our garden actually every single day. The different gardeners that go out there into our community garden know to look for insects every day on plants, especially ones like cucumbers and squash, things like that, where there are some pretty damaging insects. Another way that you can keep these insects away from your plants is to use row covers. That's very helpful. The great thing about row covers is that you're keeping the insects out, but depending on when you put them on your plants, if it's a plant that needs pollination, there is a point at which you'll need to lift it off. Hopefully you get it on early enough so that you're catching or eliminating those insects while they're in their first stages and ready to come out, fly over and attack. There are certain things that are natural that you can use. Different insects respond to traps. Some people like to use diatomaceous earth. And the last thing that is available to someone, and it's really, picking insects by hand or the eggs is really terribly effective. It really is a good way to do that. But if you have to use a pesticide, just make sure that you choose one that is for the insect that you're trying to control, and read the directions once, read them twice if you have to, because there's a lot of good information on there. And you don't want to, with pesticides, there's a lot of beneficial insects out there. So you want to be careful about how you apply them. Okay.
Patty, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You said like don't use pesticides unless you have to, and you mentioned how effective hand picking, squashing, interrupting the reproductive cycles by like getting, removing the eggs, like all of those things that we can do manually that are just specifically targeting that insect. What does that mean, like, to say, like, if you have to like use pesticide, like do you have any advice about like what would push you towards making that decision?
What would push me towards making that decision is if there were a huge infestation. The thing is that if you use mechanical controls like your row covers and you start checking early your leaves on your plants, many insects start attacking plants at the very early stages. So that's why it's beneficial to use some sort of row cover. And it's just such a good habit to get into, to look and inspect your plants when they're younger. You need to do it a little more often. As they grow and get stronger, you still need to do it, but it's usually 2 or 3 days a week that you would need to go in and look at everything. And you're really going to catch the majority of insects that way. In our garden, in the community garden, that's all we've ever done. And it's been very effective. We haven't had any infestations where we can't control them. So that is always a last choice. And we have not had to use pesticides in our garden.
That's really great extra information. Thanks. I don't want to slow us down too much, but I had one other question too about, you mentioned only use pesticides if you can identify the insect.
Yeah, I mean, if you know that you have.
What if you can't find the insect?
Oh, I'm sorry. What if you can't find it?
Yeah, what if you can't see the insects that are causing the damage? What if you don't know? Like, how do you do that?
There is a point that you will see them no matter what. I mean, there are certain insects, let's say like the squash bug, they overwinter in the ground, and as adults they start coming out in the spring, early in the spring, and you may notice them at that point. If you don't, because they're kind of hard to see, they're not small, they're about the size of a thumbnail, but they also the coloration on them, if you're not really looking closely and inspecting the ground around your squash plants, you might miss them, but you're going to be sure to see eggs because they'll come up the plant. They will lay eggs on the leaves of the plant underneath. They usually do that underneath. And then if you're not careful, the ideal thing is to catch the eggs and crush them. I use duct tape sometimes to just, wrap it around my fingers, and I just kind of gently dab to pull the eggs off. I think there's a picture in here of what those eggs look like so they can be recognized. And then there's the period where they start to hatch, and you're going to see little tiny gray bugs running around on the leaves. So you want to, that's why it's so important to start checking on the leaves for any adults. And then if they start laying eggs, or I should say, when they start laying eggs, take care of those as soon as you can. It's not difficult. It's more, I would say, just kind of boring because you really have to look closely, and it's not the most fun thing to do, but you will not be disappointed if you take care of those early.
Cool. Thank you so much for those extra little tidbits. Thanks.
Sure. And this next slide talks about beneficial insects. And there are plenty of these out there. These are just a few of the more common ones. The lady beetles, also known as a ladybug. I really wanted to point out on here that they're at the different stages before they become an adult. They can be mistaken for a bad insect if you don't know what to look for. I call them dragons because they kind of have that look. They're black, and then they have the little orange or reddish stripes on them. don't get rid of those babies if you see them, because at the larval stage, lady beetles do an amazing job on aphids and other soft-bodied insects. And it only takes them about 2 to 3 weeks from the egg stage to get to the adult. The adults also will eat aphids. You just have to make sure that, well, you don't want aphids there, but they will fly away if you don't have, if they don't find enough of their food source. So always check to make sure that if you see these little different versions of the larvae, that you don't get rid of them. Green lacewings is another good beneficial insect. Syrphid flies that look a little bit like a bee. You have to, but there are just things to distinguish them, but they're good to have around the garden. Earwigs can be a pest, or they can be a beneficial, but they're more a beneficial than they are a pest. And earwigs, like many others, if you have followed some of that information about maintaining healthy plants, if they're in the pest stage, they're not going to be able to cause as much damage as they would if you just haven't followed some safety practices for your garden. Okay.
This is great, Patty. The one thing I just wanted to make a quick connection to, Tim Villard from Growing Gardens talked to us about like the advantage of, watering your garden well, and to provide just like hydration for a lot of the beneficial insects in the driest times of year, and the importance of planting like flowers with your vegetable gardens to create habitat for a lot of these different beneficial insects as well that are going to attract them into the garden. Are there any other like tips like that you, before we get into like some of the pest bugs, that you might like to offer us, to how we might kind of create an environment that welcomes and supports these beneficial insects, so that we don't have to do as much squashing because the beneficials are eating them?
Right. You don't want it to get away from you. You really do want as many beneficials as you can get. Those are the two that you mentioned are huge. Watering consistently is one of the best ways to keep them in your garden. Ladybugs like to have water around. As adults, if you don't have some sort of moisture source for them, they're more apt to fly away, in addition to if all the aphids are gone. You want to try to keep them in your garden, and that's one way you can do that. And there are so many different plants that you can use that will attract insects, the beneficial insects as well. We always put a lot of perennials or annuals at the ends of our rows to try to attract them. And there's different thought processes on whether other plants will keep bad insects away. So I don't want to go into that too much, because that's almost another topic on its own, but those are also things that you can attract beneficials, and you can try to discourage the bad bugs.
Thank you so much. Sorry to keep interrupting. It's such
Oh
good
no, that's
information.
okay. That's okay.
Awesome.
The first insect that I'll talk about is something that is called a harlequin bug. And they're kind of actually interesting. They're pretty, they're brightly colored. Sometimes people will look at them and think, or will look at lady beetles in one of those larvae stages and think they're harlequin bugs. And that's why I kind of go, no, look carefully. There's a difference. For one thing, they're going to be thinner, narrower. The lady beetle larvae, and color wise, we all know what a lady beetle looks like. So it's unlikely that you would confuse them at the adult stage. Harlequin bugs are pretty serious about destroying cabbages and broccoli, all of those great little vegetables. And the way they do that is their mouth parts. They pierce into the leaf or the stem, and they literally suck the sap out of the leaves. They will attack the growth parts of the plant, which will keep the heads from forming. So you're not going to get a good head of cabbage. You're not going to get a full broccoli. It can be pretty disappointing when are trying to produce a vegetable and then these things get out of control. And if you look over there on the other side, that is what a harlequin bug insect looks like. They look like almost like a little drum. They're a pretty pearl color and they're circular. I liken them, I have food on the head, but they kind of remind me of cinnamon rolls because they have that little swirl at the top that goes around. And there's a little like light gray to black line that goes around the top. Okay. I think flea beetles are the bane of almost everyone's existence. There are tons of different kinds of flea beetles in Colorado, and they show up, it seems like just really suddenly. They like the heat, so they can be around for a while. They will attack lettuce, they will attack tomato leaves, they'll attack almost anything. But again, with a healthy garden, your plant is likely to outgrow the damage that these guys can do. You can get rid of them like with a good squirt of water. Some people actually use like handheld vacuums, so you have to be very careful. You don't want to, put it on high power and suck the leaves down into the vacuum, but you can do that. Eventually they will go away. And it'll look like, oh my gosh, look at my leaves. They're called shot holes for the flea beetles. But like the slide says here, as long as you're not losing more than 20 to 30% of your foliage, your plant is going to be okay if you follow good practices for planting and raising the vegetables. And they do jump. I don't know if anybody has experienced those, but they are you can't really squash those because they jump pretty quickly and they can fly too. Okay.
I have a quick question actually. So what about the idea of using like Castile soap or essential oil or things like that, or dish soap? Is that beneficial to getting rid of insects, or does that harm the plant?
It can be. I mean, some of those different items, it just depends, because let's say insecticidal soap, they don't necessarily last very long. You don't have any idea. You can, spray your tomato leaves with the, say, an insecticidal soap or neem oil, that type of thing, and it could last from, I don't know, a couple of hours to maybe a day, and then the effectiveness goes away. So it's okay, but you still have to be on top of them to make sure that you're catching them. And then if it rains, you have to reapply. So they go away for a little while, but they come back.
Can I also, there's a farmer that I was speaking to in Chicago who had a terrible problem with flea beetles and was trying to address it. And in his research, he was telling me that beneficial nematodes in the soil are helpful for flea beetles, not because they are effective against the adults, but because the beneficial nematodes eat the larvae of the flea beetles in the soil before they emerge. And so you might have to treat the soil a couple of times, or like be able to, maintain a population of those beneficial nematodes in the soil, the particular species that, might have an impact on flea beetles. Is that something that you kind of thinking about? I know Extension does a lot of research and kind of really supports research of treatments like that. Is that something you've ever heard of as effective treatment against flea beetles, or is there a way that Extension could support us?
Yeah, I have heard of it. And if you're lucky enough to have them, one of the entomologists that taught some of the master gardener classes said that is a good way to control a number of insects. You can buy nematodes and introduce them into your soil if you don't have any. Naturally occurring is always great.
All right, thanks.
Mexican bean beetles are, they're kind of cute. They look like a lady beetle, but be aware, at first glance, they do look like a lady beetle, but they have a whole lot more spots. I think it's like 16 on their body, different rows of 16 spots, and they're also not red. They're going to be kind of a bronzy orange color. And honestly, sometimes when you see them out in the sunlight, you kind of have to look at them from different angles so you can tell that they're what the color is. But the big difference to notice is that they have all those spots. The eggs are very easy to see, laying them on the bottom of on the leaf, and they cluster them just like the harlequin bug did too. And if the larvae weren't so dangerous, they'd be kind of cute because they're yellow and spiny, very bright yellow. They're not showing the bright yellow in this photograph as well as, what you would actually see on the leaf, but they are voracious eaters. They squash easily. I will say that. All those life stages. But look at the damage that they do on the leaves. If you don't catch them early, they absolutely eat the leaf till it looks lacy. You can see through it. And that's the kind of damage if you let them get out of control, they'll eat enough leaves where it could damage your crop. Next slide. And the cucumber beetle is also pretty voracious eater. They have two different kinds. There's a striped cucumber beetle and there's a spotted cucumber beetle. We, in our community garden, have never seen this spotted cucumber beetle. We have had the striped cucumber beetle. They are really hard also to catch. Because they I don't know whether they feel the vibration or what, but you get your hand really close by there and they just fly away. They can be difficult to control. And the eggs are actually laid in the ground in cracks in the soil. So you have to be extra careful. These are insects that benefit from row covers to exclude them from your plants. Do it early enough in the season. Big difference is, and it's really kind of interesting, again, I mentioned earlier, you have to remove the row cover at some point if you have cucumbers that require pollination. So this year, after a couple of years of having some difficulties with these guys, we looked into disease-resistant cucumber seeds. And that's been very effective. Keep in mind that just because something is resistant, it doesn't mean that there can't be attacks. They're just usually not going to be as horrendous as they are if you don't do anything to control them. What's I going to say about those guys? It's very helpful to buy or grow your own seeds if you're working from starts with cucumbers. There are 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know. We investigated some of them, but there are types of cucumbers that are not only disease resistant, but they don't require, they get the blossom because they have to have that for the fruit set, but they don't require a bee to come in and pollinate it. So you can keep them covered for a lot longer, whole season if you want, but they'll go away eventually. Another thing that cucumber beetles can do to your garden they carry disease. One of the big things it's called a vector. So they carry a bacterial disease that will cause something called cucumber wilt, which can be and often is fatal to the plant. And in that case, you just have to pull it out and destroy the damaged leaves. They will, they chew on the leaves. They've got great little mouth parts, and they suck out sap and inject this bacteria into the cucumbers. And it looks at first, they'll start to wilt, and you may not pay much attention to that, but because cucumbers naturally will wilt, even if they're watered, they will naturally wilt a little bit during the daytime, and then then they perk up again. If that doesn't happen, you need to consider that you have something eating your plants, and oftentimes it's going to be these cucumber beetles. Okay. And this is one that I referred to a little bit earlier. You can see the different stages of the squash bug. They're very destructive for just about any kind of squash, pumpkins, acorn squashes. So you just keep an eye on it. We were very, very, very intent and intentional about keeping an eye out for these little critters, and very successfully won the battle. I mean, just every single day, one of the gardeners was out there looking through all the leaves, turning them over. I mean, you have to actually look on the leaves on the underside, and we're very successful in most cases to catch the eggs. In some cases they hatched, but they were on a leaf where you could just crush them, scoop them off, or put them, crush them or sweep them off into a bucket of water. And we had minimal damage. We still had a crop. Some of the leaves were damaged, but there were more healthy leaves than there were unhealthy leaves. So that kind of proves the point of making sure that you have planted successfully and taking care of your vegetables throughout the process to help them outgrow possible damage. Okay. I want to thank you for being here for this presentation. It was a pleasure for me to do that, but I'd like to just add one more thing, and that is this list of references and websites. If you have questions about your garden, you can go to the Master Gardener Help Desk at that first email. The email address on the first line, and somebody will answer your questions about any problems that you're having in your garden. And the next thing that this is really cool. If you're a gardener and are interested in growing produce and donating that to folks that are in need, whether that is a neighbor, a food bank, your church, anything like that, there's a program called Grow and Give, and you can register for that online. It doesn't cost anything to do that. And you just donate your food, and then go in and fill out a little form that says, hey, on this date, I donated peppers, carrots, and tomatoes. And they keep track of all that. It's fun, in addition to being something that's very helpful and pretty near and dear to my heart. The community garden that we grow at the extension, we donate all of our produce to a food pantry. And it's a pretty good feeling. One of the resources that are available, in addition to the entire website that has all kinds of fact sheets about gardening, is this booklet called the Colorado Vegetable Guide. And it's available even if you're not in the program. But if you are, it's going to be helpful either way. It has all kinds of information here about certain popular vegetables that are can be grown here. It gives you charts that talk about what kinds of insects might affect these plants, how to take care of the plants in terms of controlling the insects. And it's incredibly helpful. And it's available online. You can keep it online and use it that way, or you can print it off. It doesn't cost anything. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that and use it.
Thanks for sharing this resource, Patty. I took a look at it last week when you shared it, and I love all of the information at the beginning that, Laura, you're scrolling through now, and then as you get down into the individual vegetables. I don't know if this is any of your experiences in the garden, but I found that every time I get to know a little bit more about one of the vegetables, it's like it's almost like you're like welcoming them into your family, or you're like becoming friends with them. You just like start to understand the different needs of different plants, and what are the insects, the beneficial insects that they attract or that you find on them, and what are the harmful insects that you find on them. Like, it's just such a great, this is such a great resource to get to know some of your crops a little bit better.
Thank you. That's a great way to put that. It does really attach you to your garden and make you pay. I like that you said it's kind of like inviting you into the family. That's a really good way to think about it.
Well, at this point, I wonder, kind of Stephanie or Laura, if you have any thoughts and kind of anything that's happening in your garden that this has prompted, or any just kind of completely unrelated garden questions that might have popped up over the course of the meeting today that we might be able to dig into a little bit with Patty. We still have a couple more minutes left.
Well, I just wanted to say thanks, first of all, for presenting for us. And I know a lot of our childcare providers who grow gardens have had lots of questions. I know some of them have used the Master Gardeners as a resource before, but I'm hoping that maybe after watching this presentation, we'll have more people reach out to you when they have questions in their garden. I was also going to mention that we have a produce database that we made for our participants, and we actually link to that vegetable guide that you guys have.
Oh, good.
In it to each page. So I don't know if anybody's watching this, if they've used that before, but you can find that in our produce database also. So I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, good. I'm glad that people are linking that to other resources.
I bet it's so helpful. And it's good because I'm not a master gardener anywhere close like you are. So whenever people reach out with questions, I don't always know what to say to them, but it's a helpful tool, I think, for them. But yeah, great information. I've definitely had those flea beetles before in my garden, so I'm glad to have some tips and tricks to get rid of them. I've seen those not squash bugs, maybe, I don't know, the cucumber beetles before too on my cucumbers. So very good and very helpful. I haven't had problems yet this year, so, but I'm I mean,
I find that, if you don't mind me saying so, I find that in my home garden, flea beetles, I just expect them every year. I'm like, okay, tomatoes need to be this far apart, and I have my watering system set out so they're getting the right amount of water. I use the shade cloths to keep them happy, and straw mulch around them. I will admit I use diatomaceous earth because that can help control those smaller insects like beetles. But I get them every single year. They just are going to come.
That seems my experience also.
I mean, if you follow good practices, they do. My plants are super tall, they've set fruit, and there are still some flea beetles hanging around, but they're just not doing any damage to the plant at this point. other than, those little shot holes.
Yeah. Good to know. Good to know.
And I'll be on the first time I saw those, I thought, oh no, I don't have the perfect plant.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So,
Well, thank you. I don't know, Laura, do you have anything?
Well, we have a gooseberry bush, and we've been having some issues with our gooseberry bush, but I think it's getting better. It's in a pot or a bucket, because we don't have a place to plant it in the ground in our apartment. So,
yeah.
so he lives outside, and he's been doing well for about the past couple years. We had originally gotten him in the winter time, and he had made it through the winter, and then fruited last summer.
Yay.
And then this year he has fruited, but we went away for a few weeks and had someone else looking after him, and I think maybe they didn't give him enough water because it, very hot. And we got back, and he had yellowing on the leaves, on some of the leaves. Some of the leaves had kind of like little holes. And then I'm trying to think what else. Some of the berries were like shriveled. And just so I took some pictures and sent it to Harlequin's nursery. Because that's where we got him from. And they said that they checked with each other and felt like it was probably just that he was over dry. So we've been giving him a little more compost. We've been making sure he's well watered, and then we gave him some organic liquid fertilizer in like a really small dosage, like every other week, to try to boost him a little bit. So I think he's doing better, but I was just worried because there was the yellowing on the leaves. There were also like these weird little holes in the leaves, and I don't know if that's just they were starting to dry up, or that. I don't know how much you know about gooseberries, but
I know. I mean, I would have to do more research about that pains, but I know that in raspberries, because I had a question about these a couple of weeks ago. Mites can be a problem with types of bushes.
Okay, I haven't seen anything on them. Would I see?
Yeah.
I've been inspecting the leaves, and I haven't seen any pests, but I don't know.
That's great. You're doing the right thing to keep an eye on it before it gets bad.
Yeah. So we've been trying to make sure that he's doing okay, and he's definitely fruited a lot. We've just had to take some of the fruit off that were like pretty shriveled up and didn't grow super well, but he does have a good amount of berries that look pretty healthy.
Yeah. So are there more developing after the ones that you removed?
No, I haven't seen, well, I've seen some shriveled berries. So that's why I'm not sure if it's not the dryness or if it, and it is something else, but it's hard to say.
Okay. Well,
is there a way I would
let us know if you have any continued problems, and we'll see what we can do.
Sounds good. Cool. I will.
You'll have to follow up on that help desk email.
I think so, for Jerry the gooseberry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
all right.
It's a great tool. Though.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, I think this maybe brings us to the conclusion of our online series. Patty, I'm so grateful for all of this fantastic information you shared with us today.
Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much for hosting today's session, and Stephanie for all the support that you and the team at Farm to ECE, Boulder County Farm to ECE, has been providing throughout this entire series. Also, an additional thank you to Tonya Johnson, who is supporting us with Spanish language interpretation, and Leticia, who helped to coordinate all of our Spanish translation for this entire series. Sean, thanks so much for your help in recording. And yeah, we hope that all of the folks who are watching this recording can learn a little bit more about the natural world that we get to really learn about and get to love when we spend time in our garden. And we don't have to be quite so afraid of all the little creepy crawlies, and some of them are really great for the garden, and some of them you know, can cause trouble for a handful of crops, and getting to know them and how they work and what they're connected to, what plants they eat and what eats them, and how we can be stewards of those relationships in ways that also feed us is such a powerful, wonderful thing. So thank you all for contributing so much, and looking forward to whatever comes next in our garden education conversations together.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I would think I'll take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.